I'm George Galloway and I present Kalima Hurrah on Mayadeen television. Here we are in London. I speak my words freely, either in Parliament, on television, here on the streets of London. Kalima Hurrah means free word. That's what I speak. So Kalima Hurrah is a two-way conversation. Check it out on Mayadeen television. Welcome to Kalima Hurrah with me, George Galloway, on Mayadeen television, coming to you from London, but talking about Palestine. An audience of distinguished experts and one or two enthusiastic amateurs like me. In the beginning, there was only Palestine. And then there was a United Nations resolution which partitioned Palestine. And then there was the borders that existed after the State of Israel was founded in 1948. Then there were the Israeli borders after their war on their neighbors in 1967. In the decades, half-century since, these borders have not changed, but the millions of Palestinian people living in the land that was once Palestine, then partitioned Palestine, then occupied Palestine, have of course grown and grown. In the quarter of a century since the Oslo Accord, which has never been implemented, not an inch of Palestine has been vacated by the Israeli occupiers, and Gaza has, as everyone knows, for a decade lived under murderous siege. Jerusalem has been annexed. The Golan Heights have been annexed from Syria. Yet concession after concession after concession have been both demanded and largely given by the Palestinian people. Yet nothing changes, nothing good for them at least. And then came President Trump. Now, if you think President Trump is a snake oil salesman from whom you wouldn't buy a second-hand car, you should take a look at his son-in-law. Jared Kushner is in charge of the deal of the century, and if you believe that, I've got a bridge here in London that I could sell you at a knockdown price. A deal of the century offered by the son-in-law of Donald Trump doesn't sound like it's going to be much of a deal for me. Certainly, even the Palestinian leadership in Ramallah have rejected it. Maybe they know more about what's in it than we do. They are very cagily showing us their cards. The economic cards, so-called, will be shown in Bahrain. The political cards, the geographical cards, the topographical cards, the cards of what the Palestine Jared Kushner has in mind will be released later. But he gave us a hint when he said that maybe in time the Palestinian people will be capable of governing themselves. Straight from the lexicon of colonial powers everywhere and at all times. The Palestinians are not really occupied, it's just that they're children. They are really not developed enough to govern themselves. So that's as good a clue as we've seen so far of what Jared Kushner has in mind. He has the full support, of course, of Netanyahu's Israel. He has the full support of Israel's friends around the world, powerful lobbies in many countries, most countries, maybe all countries, are working to assure us that this deal of the century really will be the kind of deal described in President Trump's book, The Deal, as having something in it for everyone. Some of my distinguished audience will have a view on what might be in it, what might be our response to it. Let's start with the distinguished academic and medical doctor, writer, teacher, Dr. Ghada Karmi, herself a Jerusalemite. Dr. Karmi, what do you think might be in this deal of the century, and what's your view about it?
Well, as you said, we don't know exactly, but there have been a number of leaks in the press which give us a good idea about what's in it. And briefly, it couldn't be worse for the Palestinians. It really couldn't be worse. But the thing, that is so striking about all this is something you've actually mentioned just now, this whole colonialist thing. It is truly extraordinary to me that after a bit more than a century since the Balfour Declaration was passed by Britain, that declaration which imposed the presence of European Jews on Palestine, on the Palestinians, without asking them, without getting their consent. We have the same situation here. Foreigners again, this time the American Empire, not the British Empire, foreigners again coming to our region and dictating to the Palestinians what they shall have and what they shall not have without engaging them in discussion, without asking their view. It's amazing that none of these politicians has learned anything from history. Now, in terms of the deal itself, we understand that there will be something called New Palestine. New Palestine is not a state. They're very careful never to use this term. It's not a state. It's an entity which is composed of what is currently called areas A and B of the West Bank. And this entity would be connected to Gaza by a bridge of some kind or corridor. And the entity is also connected to Jordan in a couple of places. And Israel keeps the rest. And we are told that one of the things that is not going to happen is the return of the refugees. That is cancelled by this Trump deal. And to sweeten the whole rotten deal, there is a financial package imagined to come out of the conference in Bahrain, which is due at the end of this month, where supposedly there will be a lot of money invested in this...
Promised.
Exactly, promised in this entity, in this deal, and supposedly the Palestinians are going to be very happy. They've lost land, they've lost the right of return, they've lost sovereignty, they've lost everything, but they're going to feel much better about it because there's going to be a lot of money for them. And again, you see the same flawed thinking that you can buy an indigenous population, you can mess them about, you can impose on them, you can steal their land, and you don't need to ask their permission, get their agreement, or even discuss it with them.
Whose money will it be? Just to get that out of the way.
Well, now that's a very good question. So far, we know that the Gulf states of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are definitely coming to this conference. It seems that the idea is that there would be a package, most of which, 80%, would be borne by the Gulf countries.
So the Arabs would pay money to other Arabs for the destruction of an Arab ideal and icon and the sale of Arab land and sovereignty.
Yes, very well put, yes. Now, apparently 20% there'll be contributions from the United States, from the European Union, and a few entrepreneurs or investors. So as you said, this deal, not only is it rotten for Palestinians, but the money which is supposed to shut them up is money coming from other Arabs who are themselves more friendly with Israel than with them.
Just one more question, if I may. The Palestinian leadership has refused to go to Bahrain, some other Arab countries also. But some Arab countries, including Jordan, to my surprise, are going. This is quite a risk, isn't it, for Arab regimes to attend what is intended actually as the funeral of the Palestinian idea.
Yes, indeed. And we know that Morocco Egypt and Jordan have said that they will attend. Now, in a way, though, you can understand it. In the case of Egypt, Sisi's Egypt, the Egypt which is under this particular rule, is beholden to the United States. It is allied with Israel. It feels itself unable to do anything else. And yet the irony, you know, is Gaza, which I forgot to mention in this deal of the century. Gaza is to be extended into northern Sinai. That is Egyptian land. And apparently this land will be leased from Egypt. And that solves the Gaza problem. The very country which is due to lose land in order to accommodate the Gaza population, which it does not want to do, and it's made clear repeatedly it refuses to do, apparently Sisi is going to this, or Sisi is represented rather, at this conference. But as I say, you have to understand it in terms of his alliances, local alliances, and his fears of the United States. Jordan, I can also understand. You said you were surprised, but I do understand. You see, it'll be at Jordan's expense. The deal of the century will be at Jordan's expense, without any doubt, because nobody is stupid enough not to see that if the entity that is called New Palestine is going to thrive or to prosper in any way, it's almost certainly going to extend itself into Jordan. Almost certainly Palestinians from there will probably move to Jordan. So Jordan has a lot to lose. And I think they fear not to be at any of these major conferences in case deals are done over their heads, behind their backs. I think that's how I would read it. Morocco, I do not understand. Maybe somebody here can say, I don't understand Morocco at all.
I said last question, forgive me, one more. The Palestinian Authority is not represented, but is that cosmetic? Is this really all being done entirely behind the backs of Abu Mazen, the presidency, the government in Ramallah, or are they secretly allowing this process to continue?
We are told that the Palestinian Authority knows more about the deal than has been leaked. So they are apparently in the know about what's intended. Now, there's great fear amongst Palestinians that they might weaken, that they might allow themselves to be pressured into acquiescing. I think it's unlikely. This is a step too far, even for a leadership which has shown itself to be feeble, subservient to Israel, and so on. I think this is a step too far.
The Palestinian refugees, according to Dr. Karmi's description, which I think is 100% correct, are therefore abandoned. The Palestinians in Lebanon, who are not citizens, who have a gigantic number of problems, will be abandoned forever, unless Lebanon is somehow pressed into accepting them as citizens, which I don't think Lebanon will do, because it would change the demography of Lebanon and the political balance, sectarian balance. It would, of course, also be an acceptance of the disappearance of Palestinian nationhood and nationality, and that's how it will be presented, that we refuse this for that reason. Palestinians living everywhere else in the four corners of the earth will then be abandoned, stateless, hopeless, without even the chimera of one day being allowed to return. Who would like to make a contribution on this? Yes, madam.
Hello, my name is Samira Oulailah, and I am a filmmaker. And I'd like just to kind of rejoice with you, Doctor. My parents are from Morocco, and I'm ashamed, very much ashamed, that Morocco is taking part. You were asking, you were trying to find out why. I know that the King of Morocco, his best friend and advisor is Israel-Palestine, who is very pro-Israel. To me, I feel really ashamed that not only Morocco is attending, but people who kind of strive to say that they are kind of trying to lead a free world. Those gangsters that I call them. I mean, Trump is an idiot. You could get him to sign anything as long as you give him a burger and a KFC, he'll be happy. But the insidious team behind him is Jared Kushner. This kind of sadistic green bolts as well, and the freedmen. They're like the trio, I call them, insidious trio, who are there to just destroy Palestine. I mean, they just want to save the Jewish identity and to completely destroy Palestine. To me, to do that, basically, they would have to kind of have this kind of lines of ideas, like you've said, those changes. But nothing will benefit Palestinians because at the end of the day, Palestinians will be the forgotten ones again. So.
I first met Dr. Karmi when we were both very young, and we have been involved in this, me for 4 decades. She's much younger than me, so her less. But I'm talking decades. I'm talking, getting on for half a century of involvement in the struggle for an idea of Palestinian liberation. In the beginning, no Arab leader would dare to play with such ideas because their own people might rise up and strangle them for having done so. So there isn't one answer to the question both of you are posing. The Moroccan king is doing it because he can, because he will not be strangled. The people will not rise up. As a matter of fact, there's more opposition to Israeli crimes now in Western countries than there are in Arab countries. This is a fundamental shift in the paradigm and a very dangerous one, isn't it?
I mean, again, in Morocco, you cannot criticize the king. They kind of show it as a free kind of country and liberal country. But if you say anything about the king, his policies, I mean, look at Sahara. I mean, anybody who supports the rights, and I do, of the Sahrawis, will go to prison straight away. So there is that kind of fear, in Morocco of the king. And I'm not, truly I'm not surprised that he's doing that, instead of uniting.
Yeah, we're not singling him out. I mean, of course, there are many other Arab countries, particularly in the Gulf, that are now more or less openly dancing with Israel. It's never usually revealed by them, but it's frequently revealed with great arrogance by the Israeli side. They boast about the fact, Netanyahu did this week, boast about the fact that the more or less the whole of the Gulf agrees with him about the danger of Iran and are much more interested in that than they are on the Palestine question. Thanks for that contribution. Sir.
My name is William Spring, and I'm a trade unionist. I run my own trade union called Employees Representatives, of which I'm the General Secretary. I started off my knowledge of Israel or Palestine when I was a small boy, and I was told that the Balfour Declaration was the best thing since sliced bread, because I was in a small...
Nobody watching this in the Arab world thinks sliced bread is a good idea, so the metaphor is purely Western.
Right. But anyway, I was given various statements. For example, we had a very bad winter in 1947. And the reason for that was God's judgment on England, because we had held back some boat that was going to Palestine.
Oh, I haven't heard that one before.
Yes. And I grew up in this, in a rather limited sect where our eschatology and exegesis of Holy Scripture was thoroughly mistaken. I only concluded this years later. Meanwhile, Israel had had these various wars. I only remember one, 1956. I know they had a war before, but I was only told about that one. But 56 I can remember very clearly. And Mr. Sir Anthony Eden, as he then became, assuring us that the British forces were going to Egypt to separate the combatants, when in fact a secret decision had been made. to join Israel in a war of aggression against the
President Nasser.
Palestinians. Yes. Now, my view about the current situation is this. I totally agree. All these criticisms of the deal of the century are no doubt justified and completely right. However, what we have to look at is there any way or any method to break this deadlock? I spent an afternoon commentating on Press TV on the shooting across the fence, the Gaza fence, where February last year, I think, 2018, where something like 60 Palestinians were killed by Israeli forces. Now, what I feel is the whole policy, the pro-Western policy, the policy of Blair and having wars all over the place, plus his alliance with Israel, plus the alliance with Israel and Saudi Arabia, is all completely defeated. And it hasn't, the Palestinians are stuck in a situation which is completely impossible. Consequently, is there no value at all in looking at something? I mean, even if it's money.
Didn't they, William? I mean, I supported the Oslo Agreement. More fool me. And I remember being really happy to see my friend Yasser Arafat on the White House lawn signing this deal. But this in itself was a massive concession by the Palestinian people. And they refused to take his yes for an answer. They didn't implement any part of the Oslo Agreement beyond allowing Arafat and others to return. And that hasn't done a great deal of good, that return. So I infer that you are pleading for some kind of negotiation, but negotiation leads nowhere.
I'm pleading for some movement.
Yeah, but what more can the Palestinians give?
They've already given everything.
Yes.
They've lost everything.
Yeah.
The question is there any way that any form of words or any form of accommodation can be made for so...
Well, we'll explore that in the second half.
Things.
We'll explore that in the second half of the show. I interviewed Ahad Tamimi for television last week. She's 18 years old. And I think she's representative of 18-year-old Palestinians everywhere. They will never accept this so-called deal of the century. So anyone who imagines that by bringing a group of kings and princes to Bahrain or anywhere else to sign a document, that's going to end the Palestinian issue, is in for a rude awakening. We'll be right back. You're watching Kalima Hurrah with me, George Galloway, for Mayadeen television, coming to you from London, talking about Palestine. Earlier, we took the Kalima Hurrah camera onto the streets of London to see what the people thought. Let's take a look.
Palestine has been under occupation for 70 years. Do you think Donald Trump's so-called deal of the century will resolve the conflict?
Well, to be honest, I don't think any deal Donald Trump does is going to resolve anything, because he tried to do a deal with North Korea. Look what happened there.
No, I don't, realistically. It seems very biased towards Israel, and it seems like they're also aggravating the situation with moving the capital or the embassy to Jerusalem when no other world power or any regional powers have really done that.
I really don't think it will. Bring in, especially Donald Trump, into it. He's not the most ethical politician, president there's ever been, and I just don't think that it will help at all.
By no means, especially their action to transfer the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem.
I don't think so. This guy seemed more like a clown to me than a real politician, and I don't think he will be able to solve such an important war and conflict in a such short-term period?
Well, certainly how it's been portrayed to us in the media here, I'd say no. I think it seems very controversial.
I've been in Palestine like 2 weeks ago, and I can tell that no one is actually interested in like helping Palestinian people like to get back their lands. Israeli soldiers that not even allowed like women to go to the mosque and pray during the Ramadan. They were like basically intimidate them.
Most of the regional powers, including the OIC, have rejected the deal. Why do you think the US is still insistent on promoting it?
I saw, as far as I saw, like I saw many in American college there, and I saw many investments from America there. So I think they, I don't know, they just want to support the Israeli cause.
It's mostly like a historical issue in my opinion, because Israel has been for years a close ally of the United States, especially in the Middle East. Also, there's no question about the influence of Jared Kushner in the Trump administration and his influence in shaping the policy of the United States.
I think that with politician presidents such as Donald Trump, he's very insistent on change, and despite it being rejected in the past many times, he's still going to push forward on it no matter what.
I think it's one of those things where Trump really wants to leave a label on his time in presidency, and he's just doing it because he's in love with kind of his own image. So he wants this deal to have his name on it, to be hallmarked as this guy that resolved an age-old conflict, gets something like he wants a Nobel Peace Prize like Obama got, when in reality he's not doing it correctly. He's not doing any way that will realistically work, because there's no solution without regional cooperation.
Well, common sense, I think, on the streets of London. If only in Parliament we had the same clarity. Madam, you next.
Hi, my name is Carol Hajj, and I am Palestinian. And it's not us who created the problem, but the reason I think we need to answer, you said about the 60 people shot on the border and everyday shot. I attended tribunals in Brussels, and I watched how the Israelis physically shoot. What all these world leaders have created genocidal criminals who just cannot, no amount of blood seem to satisfy them. On the other hand, there is Palestinian children every single day being kidnapped from their beds in the middle of the night and taken to be tortured for months without any charge. So we can't accept whatever amount of money to have a single child being detained or tortured or kidnapped or shot or killed. 20,000 in the last year. It's psychotic. We're dealing with psychopaths. We're not dealing with human beings. So you want to end it? Let's start to end it. Let's start charging the criminals who are shooting our children. Let's start charging. What's the point of all the tribunals when we can see them committing crimes? Why aren't they being brought to justice? They'd be brought to justice and it will stop tomorrow. It's because we give them a free hand, we let them get away with murder, 70 years of murder, saying it's okay to go and kill Palestinians. They come from all around the world just to shoot and kill Palestinians. And it's okay, they come back to England, they go back to America, they complain about anti-Semitism. It's more of a crime to say, for me to object to them killing my children than it is for them to kill my children. It's psychotic. So when we stop their crimes, then we will talk. When nothing evil lasts, nothing. Berlin Wall came down, the apartheid in South Africa ended. Israeli military occupation will end. It's not gonna last. Nothing evil lasts.
Well, yeah, it will not end just because we say it will end.
No, it will end when they are charged. They have to be charged. Why is it that they're getting
by whom? How?
For all their crimes? They come back
who's going
here.
To charge them?
Every country can start charging.
All the countries are involved in the crime.
Yeah, because
I want to ask you this.
Let's identify why
we cannot liberate Palestine.
Of course,
but we don't have to cooperate in its murder. This meeting in Bahrain could be stopped dead if every Arab government said we're not going.
But Kushner is not representative. He doesn't even have, he didn't pass security of the White House.
No, of course.
And
That's not what
Israel,
I'm saying,
Netanyahu is not the government
Sure,
right now.
sure.
They're going to vote the government in September.
Sure.
So he doesn't represent Israel. Kushner doesn't represent America. And never mind Abbas. So who exactly is sitting in that on that table?
President Abbas is not going, but the lack of firm and clear opposition by the Arab states is the biggest hole in this.
Of course.
You cannot persuade the British to charge the Israelis with shooting Palestinian children.
Why not?
But, well, good luck in trying, but,
No, but why
I
not?
don't think you will be able to persuade them to do so. But the Arabs have a responsibility to ensure that their regimes are not present at the murder. Let's take this gentleman over here.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. My name is Ken Simianba. I'm a leader of Come Together People. We mainly work with trying to bring people together. So I'm listening about Palestine and Israel, and this conflict has been going on for many years. I lived in Oslo, by the way, when the Oslo Accord was being held or agreed upon. This problem, I believe strongly that if there will be change, as I represent Come Together People, change only comes when people actually sit down together. I know we can disagree and saying this guy is maybe fantasizing. People are shouting from each corner. We're all sitting in each corner shouting, maybe that's his problem, maybe his problem. But we really...
Oh, may I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah, sure, come along.
They're not actually in each corner.
Yeah.
One of the guys has got his boot on the throat of the person on the
I understand.
ground.
I
They're not
understand.
actually shouting at each other from that corner.
I do understand that.
There's no equality in this picture.
I do understand that very well. I also understand because I did actually work closely with the ANC. And I know how it is. This is why you can imagine what happened in South Africa. And they still stood up after their independence and had a resolution where they're trying to deal with conflict resolution.
After their independence.
After independence. That's brilliant. I think the world could agree with that. I think that these conflicts that has been going on needs not only the politicians, but needs all of us to sit together to actually agree on a certain agenda. Because I believe that certain people have more, feel that they have power on others, and therefore they can control others. So if
Well, they do, don't they? It's not that they think they...
Oh yeah,
do.
it's been happening. We all realize it's been happening for so many years. And I believe that the people who think they are very educated and they know about the problems, but they've never lived the problem. I'm sitting here, I've lived those kind of problems before. I understand that in the end, we all need to sit on the table or wherever we sit, but find a solution for each and every one of us. I know that problems like Israel and Palestine has been going on for so long, and so many people have been killed, which shouldn't be. Any kind of killing, any kind of for a child, a woman, or a man is wrong. We know that. But yet we still do it. Every one of us at some point have agendas, different agendas. And we all want other people to accept our agendas. And therefore we keep on doing this, doing it by ourselves without the support of people, though we claim that we have thousands of people following us. And therefore we lead them even to jump in the sea. If we say jump, they jump. But I think it's about time for the world to realize, all of us to realize, that it's a time that we actually had a talk, a voice which says, enough is enough. We've been going on for too long about these problems. Palestine, I've heard about Palestinians since Arafat, you mentioned Arafat, when they got the Peace Prize. But still, nothing has changed since he died. And we're still going on. I feel that Israelis, and I'm sure you agree that if they don't talk with Palestinians, none of this will ever change.
Okay, let's take the gentleman at the front.
Thank you.
My name's Turan Basri. I'm not any expert. I'm a political activist, member of the Labour Party, but I take a keen interest in Israel. Listening to the various speakers, there's a couple of about three elements to this, so I want to try and frame this correctly. The first thing is asking the oppressed to sit at a table as equal partner to the oppressor is fantasy. That's not going to happen. But they've been oppressed since the very beginning of the Balfour Declaration and its implementation. And when you've got children incarcerated and shot with extreme regularity, asking the parents of them children to sit at the table and provide concessions to an oppressor, I just can't get my head around that.
Yeah.
I
Which
can't
they did
understand
already
that.
in any case.
Well, they've lost everything, George. But there's a few other things to this. I see this as deliberate manoeuvring. I think if Trump gets a deal out of this, all well and good, it'd be something to put on his CV. But I believe this is further demonstration of the Palestinians being pushed into a cul-de-sac. They're not going anywhere. And the warning signs are already there when you've got Israelis with a new nation-state law, annexing Jerusalem, looking at the settlements in the West Bank, saying that that's Israeli territory. They're going nowhere. So I honestly believe that this is set up to fail and that they will annex the West Bank. I think they will just say, look, we've tried everything, it's not working. I do despair with the point you make about the Arab nations, but I think there's a reason for that. I think since the war on terror that we had, Palestine was mentioned at that point by Blair as being crucial to easing Arab hostility. But we've got a state, Israel, built on racism. They have their March of Flags, Death to Arabs. So I don't think it's going to take a lot to change that mentality. And then we've got hostility to Arabs and Muslims over here. You've got a new Trump coming into possibly govern
By the time this show goes out, he might be the Prime Minister.
So don't expect any sympathy from the West. And I think all this is further demonstration of Western imperialism using Israel as a gatekeeper. And I really fear for the Palestinians. The only way out of this, I'm a one-statist. Many people may not accept that as an argument, but I think that's the only way out of this, is to have one state with equality for all. And well, I don't think you're going to get that.
Yeah, I started out that way and then spent a long period supporting President Arafat's line. But now it seems to me that any discussion about a so-called Palestinian state inside the occupied territories is doomed doubly, because Israel will never accept any meaningful Palestinian state, and doomed also because it doesn't solve the biggest problem, which is the millions, now well over 12 million, Palestinians outside as refugees and exiles who have no stake in that solution, cannot return to their land. So I'd like to ask Dr. Karmi, if I may. I'll come back to you. The point, Doctor, isn't it, that it's really time to struggle for the only thing that actually is a solution, which is a binational state of Israel-Palestine from the river to the sea, with all the Palestinians with a right to do so, to be allowed to return to their homes.
Yes, of course, of course. In the end, there is no solution to this problem in which the Palestinians do not regain their homeland. I mean, that to me is self-evident. Whatever else you devise, it's not going to last because it's not just. But really the issue is how. That's the problem. I think many people are agreed on the aim, on the ultimate aim of what would constitute a just solution. But the real problem is, how do you get there? Now, I've agree with a lot of stuff that's been said here, and I would add to it only that we have a big problem with Israel. Israel has a mentality which is based on supremacy. It is based on a belief that they are better than the people who also inhabit that land. So there is a discrimination which is profound in Israeli society. Now, given those sorts of problems, how actually are you going to get around it? What are you going to do? Well, I have thought a lot about this, and I must tell you, I do have a suggestion. And it would be very good if I could persuade as many people as possible of this suggestion. You see, Palestinians cannot win over the Israel we see today. An Israel allied to the United States, they cannot win. Number one. Number two, public opinion, which, of course, in the West, has changed and become much more pro-Palestinian, is very, very welcome. Public opinion, the boycott and divestment and sanctions movement are all wonderful. They will not by themselves get us the result. It'll be very long term. It will take many, many years. And in the meantime, of course, the whole of Palestine will have been lost. It leaves actually only one way. And that is for the people living under Israeli occupation, the Palestinians living under Israeli occupation, who have no rights, have no citizenship, to demand equal rights. Now, it seems self-evident to anybody in the West that equal rights is a natural request, demand by civil society, of course. In Israel, we know very well that that is not allowed. Currently, the Israeli state is governed by a government which gives about half the population citizenship and rights, and the other half of the population, that's the Palestinians, mostly Palestinians, no citizenship and no rights. So I say, why not start here? Why not leave aside, let's not talk now about 1 state, 2 states, 3 states, forget it. Let us talk about something very clear, very simple, and everybody would agree with. That is, if you, Israel, wish to stay in our territory, you wish to rule us and govern us, you must do it by giving us equal rights with all the other people you rule. If you don't want to do that, get out of our territory. Seems to me it's very simple, and it's the start of a road, a journey, which would ultimately lead to citizens, equal citizens of one state currently called Israel, but of course with equal representation in the parliament of that state, and we know very well what can follow from proper democratic representation.
Well, look, you may very well be right. I merely opine we could have decided that 50 years ago and saved ourselves a lot of struggle. Gerry.
My name's Gerry Downing. I'm from the Socialist Fight Organisation. We are for a single state. Let me say quite openly, we are for the destruction of the State of Israel. We do think that the State of Israel is unreformable. It's the latest law that's been passed, the Nationality Act, defined Israel as a state for Jews only. So the Palestinians in Israel are Untermensch. They're second-class citizens. There's something like 60 laws that discriminate against them, including a law that forbids them to marry the wrong kind of people. In the apartheid regime in South Africa, that was called miscegenation. That was called, you can't marry the wrong person, or that's against the law. So I think that it's a racist endeavour. It's a genocidal endeavour. It cannot be reformed. A single state of Palestine, from the river to the sea, with equal rights for all ethnic minorities. I think that's the only way to go. The Zionist state of Israel has enormous international significance, for instance, in the Labour Party. The Labour Party now, that anti-Semitism witch hunt in the Labour Party is aimed, of course, at the mass base, Jeremy Corbyn's mass base. And I have to say, Jeremy Corbyn is very weak in fighting that. And the reason it's aimed at Jeremy Corbyn's mass base, of course, that every leftist in the whole planet supports the Palestinians, apart from one group that shall be nameless in this country whose leader, I'm afraid to say, is an Irishman. But there you go. Every other leftist of any type at all. So if you're to be expelled from the Labour Party for support for Palestine and criticising Israel, you have cut the feet from under the vanguard of the working class in Britain. You have destroyed the working class in Britain. If you allow that to, it will have to be tackled and it will have to be defeated. And Jeremy Corbyn will cut his own legs off unless he proceeds, unless he stands up to the Board of Deputies of British Jews, in our opinion.
Last word, I think, and I wanted to come back to you, sir, on this, the question of British politics. It's a given. Whoever wins the Conservative leadership and becomes our new unelected Prime Minister will be a full supporter of Israel. Jeremy Corbyn is the first Labour leader with a track record of decades of dedicated, tireless support for the Palestinian people. And that's one of the reasons, not the only one, but quite a big one, for the tremendous tide of hostility organized against him. Just in the last days, we've learned that the Secretary of State of the United States, Mike Pompeo himself, promised a group of Jewish leaders, we don't know who they were, but that's how they are described, and of course it was secretly recorded and is now in the public domain, in which the American Secretary of State promises to push back against the possibility of Jeremy Corbyn coming to office. So Corbyn doesn't just have to defeat the Conservatives in Britain, he has to defeat much bigger and more powerful foes if he's to come to power. Gerry thinks he's been weak on it. What's your view on that? And what's the way in which the British Labour Party can resist these pressures?
Well, if you look since Jeremy Corbyn come in, membership's gone up to about 560,000. The largest political party in Western Europe. I think he's attracted a huge base. And there obviously is a battle going on within the party as to who wins that. There's constant attacks from the right of the party, in my opinion. I think a lot of the anti-Semitism accusations are unfounded. I mean, if we look at the Al Jazeera sting, where a member of the Israeli embassy was offering £1 million to bring down politicians, British politicians that would be sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, these things are not made up. Will he win? I don't know. I think with Brexit happening in the UK at the moment, I think the political landscape, all it shows is a lot of uncertainty. I don't think anyone can predict the outcome of whether we get a Labour government in or not. I would like to think we can. They've increased their vote. They had a big swing. I think it was the biggest swing since the Second World War on the last election. But unfortunately, George, you've got the collapse of the middle ground and you've got extreme polarisation happening in this country. Now, whether that we might see a Conservative government with a Brexit party propping them up, I don't know. I don't think anyone can predict that. But one thing I wanted to make a point on, George, is that you asked about the Arab countries and why they seem to be very sympathetic to the Israeli cause. Well,
no, the governments.
The governments, yeah. Well, you've got a lot of American bases making sure that these dictatorships are propped up. I think the other thing that is swaying them to the cause is Iran. I think there is a war on the horizon if we're not careful, and I think a lot of these Arab countries, being Sunni Muslim, are allying themselves with America against Iran. That's
Although
how I
most
see it.
of the Palestinians are Sunni Muslims, it doesn't seem that.
No,
that
I
religious
don't.
impulse
Yeah, I
doesn't
don't.
seem to,
Well, I'm Muslim myself.
impact on that.
I'm Muslim myself, so I don't want to play on a sectarian basis. But whether we like it or not, we've got governments here or royal families, if you want to use that term, that are using a sectarian card, and I think that's what's happening personally.
Final word to you.
Thank
2
you.
minutes.
My name is Asad Zubair. I just want to make a comment about the Irani and Saudi conflict, we can say. I don't think it's a Sunni-Shia conflict. It's a Arab-Persian conflict, which has been going on for a very, very long time. And, you know, we had Ferdowsi having poems about this wars, about the Arabs and the Persians hundreds of years ago. And I think it's just a continuation of that. And people misconcept it by calling it Sunni-Shia thing. When in my opinion, I don't think it is.
Interesting. Yes, gentleman in the middle there. Last word to you.
Yusuf Ali. I'm an interested amateur. Basically, my point is very simple. If the EU are helping to fund this, I think we need to put pressure on the EU to say don't fund it, because obviously the power is where the money is.
We need to hurry up because we'll be out the EU by the time this is shown.
We need to all write to the EU.
Well, look, equality and the right of return seem to me to be the ironclad principles. They may not prevail soon. I've given up hope they'll prevail in my lifetime, maybe in my children's lifetime. They may never prevail, but that doesn't mean that they should not be striven for. You can't guarantee when you enter a fight that you will win it, but you can guarantee if you don't fight, you will lose it. I've been George Galloway. This has been Kalima Hurrah on Al Mayadeen Television. Thank you for watching.